Welcome to the 2022 episode or initial episode of Halftime Heroes. We were supposed to air last week, but a rain delay kept that from happening. So this one will be airing this week with Tom Law because this is the weekend the game that we have the Hall of Fame presentations. And Tom, welcome back. This is our third year doing this.
3 years. Passed in a hurry, had it?
It absolutely has, and we've gotten down to I think what we have 10 or
we had
11.
We had 10 the first year and 8 or 9 last year.
And we're going to do 6 this year. And you know, one thing we've talked about is in doing the Hall of Fame is not recognize the good players. There's a lot of good players we've had. And we say players from every sport. From tennis, we've had a tennis player in here. Yep. We've shot putters, everything. But we're trying to get the great ones. Right. And one of the criteria is obviously a state championship.
That's automatic.
Yeah. Well, there's one exception, James Cannon, and that's not going to happen. But anyway, this year we've got 3 teams and 3 individuals.
That's right.
Now you're going to know a whole lot more about the teams than I do, but the first team is the 1951?
1951 Wildcats, and their claim to fame is they played a playoff game in Sanford Stadium.
The thing that's amazing about that is Rabun County's first season was 1949.
Right. This was their third year, and they made the state playoffs.
And in that playoff team, you had a Jimmy Kilby who was an all-state halfback, I believe.
He was.
I mean, it's amazing how we got competent so quickly.
One thing that added to that team, they had a lot of experience because that was the first year in the state of Georgia that you had to go 12 grades to graduate. Before,
that's right.
High school had always ended at the 11th grade, but that year it was 12 grades, and so you got guys that were a year older and a year stronger, a year more confident under Coach Snyder's system. So they had a really good team that year.
And 3 years in, and they're doing it
right.
Then the next inductee will be the 1960 football team. Is that correct?
That's right, Alan. And their thing is they are, for the longest time, were the only Rabun football team to ever win a state playoff game. They beat Roswell 28-27 in a game played at Commerce. And it would be 38 more years before a Rabun football team would win another state playoff game.
In deciding on these teams for the Hall of Fame, part of the discussion has been you have to look at the team during their time.
Right.
We've had a run of 13-game seasons in football, and that doesn't mean all those teams are not going to be Hall of Fame teams. But when you look back, like say when you're 3 years in or 10 or 12 years into a program just newly started, and you're going to Sanford Stadium or you're winning a playoff game, that's a different story. That's a different time.
Right. It was a different time. The competition was much different back then, and most of the games playoff games were played on neutral sites. The 1960 team beat Roswell in a game played at Commerce. Now it's you get the home field advantage if you're in the top 2 in your region. But back then, you either flipped a coin for home and away, or it was played on a neutral field.
Who were some of those 1960s team players?
You had guys like Tim McClure, who played quarterback most of the time. But interestingly, in the game against Roswell, got late in the fourth quarter. And Coach Snyder moved McClure to end and inserted Jerry Blair at quarterback, and he promptly threw a long bomb down to McClure down the sideline to score what would tie the game at 27, and then John Floyd kicked the extra point for a 1-point lead with just over a minute left in the game. Then you had Jim Whitmire from Mountain City, played on that team. Frank Cathy, another Mountain City product, was a running back, 130-pound running back.
All state.
Man, was a very good running back.
Yeah, he wouldn't let you forget that
Oh,
all state.
yeah, he'd tell you.
I think that's on his tombstone. But the basketball, there's in the 2011 and 2012.
2010, 2011.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Tell us about that.
Well, the first thing that stands out with it, they won 27 games.
Yeah.
Had a 27-4 record, and advanced all the way to the Elite Eight in the state tournament. But here's what made them really special. There was not a single senior on the team. That whole team was made up of underclassmen, and managed to get that far in the state tournament. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Was that at the beginning of D.D. Dillard's?
That was the second year.
Yeah.
In fact, the 2010, 2011 team won the second straight region championship. So the previous year was probably the first team that started this long, successful run that Coach Dillard has seen here at Rabun County.
And that's another situation like football is you've got this standard of excellence over a prolonged period of time to where you're expected to win 90% of your games. And there's a reason why when we look back at maybe a team that won 70 or 80% of the games, it's a Hall of Fame team. It's just we're basing everybody on the time that they played.
Well, if you go back and look at Rabun athletic history, there have been a lot of ups and downs through the years. And so you'll find a team that has started the upturn after 4 or 5 seasons of losing seasons. And so that team deserves some recognition too.
Now, going on to the individual people who are getting in, Tanner Plemons.
Tanner Plemons, he's the head boys basketball coach at Chestatee now. But 10 years ago, he was a hot shooting guard, high scoring guard for Rabun County. He finished his career here with over 2,400 points. That's a lot of points.
That's
for
just
high school.
Amazing.
It is absolutely astonishing.
And to quote Roy Quilliams, he could jump out of the building.
He could jump. I got to see him play a few games, and my biggest compliment is he could score.
Yeah.
I mean, he could score no matter who was guarding him. And I think he has at one time had a record or close to a state record for 3-point shots made in his career, over 400.
Wow.
I mean, that's just unheard of.
I don't think I've shot at 400 baskets in my life.
Well, it's been a long time now since I've done that.
What period of time did Tanner play in?
Well, he graduated in 2012, 2010 through 2012 was his time in Rabun County.
Then I'm getting a sign we need to move it along, but Trisha Taylor. She was a few years younger than me in school, but I actually was I guess you would call that a contemporary, but state champion shot put.
Interesting thing about her, when she moved in here as a sophomore, first year she finished 9th in the state in shot put. Her junior year she was up to 4th, and her senior year she won it. But here's the other interesting thing about Trisha that I discovered. After she left here, she went to West Georgia to play basketball. And she played there for a year, but then switched over to volleyball. And ended up, her name is still in the record books at West Georgia for some of the volleyball records. So she had to have been a tremendous athlete.
I played football with her brother, but they were very athletic people. Yeah, absolutely. The last individual, John Iffemeier.
Last but not least, John.
If you see him, you know it's not least.
John started at offensive tackle for Georgia Tech for 3 years.
And when we're looking at these Hall of Fame people, it's not necessarily just what they did here at Rabun County. John Iffemeier was I guess you would call him still a standout at Rabun County, but his contemporaries on the line were Mac Burroughs, Scott Bleckley, David Sullivan, Paul Griggs, some real good linemen at the time. But he walked on at Georgia Tech.
Walked on.
And
his last year there was offensive captain.
Yeah.
I mean, Rabun County, little old Rabun County in the mid-'80s had 2 starting offensive linemen on the state's 2 major college football teams. That's pretty outstanding.
Oh, absolutely. And a good guy.
And a real good guy.
Good guy. But we're getting the hook here. He's saying our time's up. But Tom, thanks again, and I'm hoping we'll be back here again next year to talk about the next class.
Looking forward to it, Alan.
Well, thank you, Tom. Brought to you by Stockton & Stockton, attorneys at law. We'll see you next week for another episode of Halftime Heroes. Hopefully Nathan Dunham will be here then.